So I would like to introduce our first speaker. Virginia has worked in the private sector and academia throughout her career, combining her interest in science, policy research, and performance within and across organizations. She recently joined ABPI to lead the organization's policy efforts to advance the agenda for research, medical, and innovation opportunities that will lead to better treatments for patients. Virginia previously worked for Amgen as Director, Global Regulatory and R&D Policy, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Previously, she spent nearly 5 years at Pfizer working on policy development and engagement in a number of domains, including science, innovation, and access and choice in healthcare. She entered the pharmaceutical industry after a decade in academia, where she held posts in innovation strategy at Imperial College London Business School, the Science Policy Research Unit at University of Sussex, and the Centre for Research and Innovation Management at the University of Brighton, as well as a postdoctorate fellowship at the London Business School. She is also a visiting researcher in the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Department at Imperial College Business School, London. Welcome.
Thank you. I hope that makes me qualified to speak about innovation, but I'm not ever sure it really does. But hello to everybody this afternoon, and thanks for the chance to speak to you. I mean, perhaps a good way to start is to say, I know on the agenda it has about the regulatory rules by which we have to work together, but really what I wanted the theme for this afternoon to be about was about how do we establish common ground so that we can work together. Because I think the rules are necessary, but the desire to work together is really what comes first. And I do think that's something that we have made tremendous progress with in the industry, and particularly on how we work together on innovation and R&D, and specifically, it can't be done in any other way really for the rare diseases. So I think you all are specifically at the front end of how we move things forward. So when we talk about working together, I think, frankly, it's about understanding how that collaboration is going to be possible, both on the priorities of what we're going to research. So what do we mean by unmet need? Do we all have the same idea about unmet need? How we go about doing that? So what are the methods that are selected to do this? And what would be the outcomes? So how do you value what's been done? And it's something where I think patients have been very good about raising the profile about what may be seen as a valuable outcome, but for one stakeholder may not be the most prioritized outcome for patients. So about understanding that differentiation and how we get to there. And I think you only get their minds changing. That's got to be done through collaboration. Unfortunately, sometimes when that works and when pharmaceutical companies are working in patient groups, there can be questions raised about, is that a case of collusion of getting patients to support what a company actually wants to achieve and not the other way around. So that's something that obviously concerns everyone, but it leads to occasions where patient groups have been challenged, and obviously that's something that we need to call out. It's the elephant in the room that always comes up. And what I'm going to suggest in brief is that the way we've been managing this is by being transparent and having some fairly clear rules of engagement, so that if anybody wants to raise questions, they can. If anybody wants to kick the tires on the partnership, they can. And hopefully that helps reassure people that people can collaborate even where they're may not have exactly the same incentives to be working together in the public press, but we can demonstrate why it's valuable and how it's being managed. But to do that, you have to have an active process. So it can't be a case of just working together to run through an approach quickly and without a whole lot of dialogue going throughout. So you don't just sign up and walk away and say, yes, yes, it's all fine. It's about monitoring, it's about being there and present in partnership throughout. So beginning with what the buzzword really we've been having today has been around patient-centered innovation. I don't think I've seen a single policy document coming out of the European Medicines Agency or even the Commission that doesn't say patient-centered innovation in the top paragraph. But what has been meant by patient-centered innovation? I'm using a quote from a document and some work that IAPO has done. I don't know if anybody's familiar with IAPO, but They're the International Alliance for Patient Organizations. So they get the wonderful opportunity to represent all patient organizations from all therapeutic areas around the world. I don't know if that's a privilege or a challenge. I think it's a bit of both when you talk to the way Jo Groves managed it while she was the CEO. But she did some really interesting research. One of the pieces she did was this work with UCL, which was trying to establish what do patients care about innovation as opposed to what do companies expect out of innovation. Is there a difference? What's the overlap? How does it work together? And I thought what was really important from that is that there's this obvious recognition that innovation is valuable to patients because it does provide the mechanism to better treatments, better care for patients. But that to do that, there needs to be that information, provide patient advocates with background information on the issues and the challenges and the opportunities that are present in that process so that they can play an active and vibrant role in that process. And that helps to identify which for patients, as the IAPO paper picks up, the priorities that patients would have for innovation, but also about equity of access, which is also an imperative across the patient groups. So what does that mean for rare diseases? I don't think I need to spend too long on that. You all know this better than me. Oops, I'm missing that one. The imperative for innovation in rare diseases is almost self-evident. There is clearly a phenomenal piece of work still to be done to address rare disease. And it's obviously highly impactful for the European Union and all the member states and the groups within it. I like the quote that on average 5 new diseases are described every week in the medical literature. That's baffling and staggering at the same time. That's a wonderful thing in that we're discovering them. It's also a daunting thing as to what do you do about them. 80% of the rare diseases have identified genetic origins and affect 3%, 4% of births. But do we have those genetic information to deal with that? Do we have the infrastructure? And again, there's a whole other stream of research around precision medicine which supports this. And then finally, obviously there's so much still lacking and not known about the rare diseases out there. And I think what concerns me most is the last point the EMA points out, which is that it's impossible to see how attention is given equally across rare diseases. And so some will get more attention than others, and that can be very challenging if you are the patient in the rare disease that nobody seems to have picked up as their champion ideal. So these are, I think, areas where innovation is still obviously really necessary and needed to bring to bear, and why there's still so much yet to be done and so much more scope for collaboration between the pharmaceutical industry together with patients. So what have we done so far? I mean, it's not that this is the first day that the pharmaceutical industry pays attention to these things. Obviously, we've been working on them for a while, and there is some good results. Oops, there we go. I apologize, these are U.S. data, but it was the nicest. My colleagues at Bio have put together a nice comparison of a trend over 12 years that just, I think, really shows that the growth in attention and investment into rare disease R&D has definitely borne fruit. These are the number of orphan drug approvals. Obviously, approvals, these are the successful ones. There'll be many other ideas behind that which were less successful and didn't get through all the way to the end. But it's averaging on approvals of 24 approvals by 2012. So the trend is good. It's not going to cover all the thousands at the minute, but the trend is good and progressing. In the EU, these are the number of leading EU orphan designations. And again, in 2014, I'm not expecting you to read that little tiny writing back there. That would be, I can't even read that little tiny writing from here. I definitely can't read it on my paper. But the simple point is to show, again, you've got a range of rare diseases for which indications have been established in approvals. However, that's not thousands, that's tens. And there does seem to be a slight bias towards one back end. So it's about understanding how we can use patient voices to really identify priorities and opportunities well. And right now, it's progressing, but clearly I still think some great opportunities to do more. So, sorry. What I also like to see, and this is, let me explain this kind of a figure. This is trying to demonstrate the expectation that's made based on analysts looking at companies' investment in pipeline to identify who will be the top 20 companies active in orphan drug markets, and who will be developing the medicines for the future. So the current is the light blue, is the, well, it's not really light blue, what is that, marine? I'm not good with colors, we need the graphic designer to help me here, but the lighter blue is 2013. The dark blue is 2020. And what's that showing, as you can see them all kind of shrink down to 2020, is that you've got basically a broadening of the pool. That's a market share difference. So it's telling you that amongst your top 20, it's spreading out a lot more evenly because you have new entrants coming in. You have new companies joining the contribution. I think that's tremendous news. So if you have more companies coming into bear into rare diseases, this can only bode well for the opportunities for new medicines and new treatments by 2020. So I think that's a very good news story. I think that's very positive. That's not true in all areas of therapy. That's not true in all areas of medicine innovation. But in rare diseases it is, and I think that's a very positive place that we're starting from to talk today about how we're going to work together. So, moving on to that. Again, it's not a case that we haven't been collaborating, we have been, and I just wanted to give a couple of examples that I think show a real potential for how patient groups can affect how R&D develops. And I'm not sure if anybody in the room has been involved in an IMI project. Has anybody been? Great. Fantastic. Ooh, gosh. I'm going to present this part. But there's two ones that I picked out, particularly the proactive study is physical activity as a crucial patient-reported outcome in COPD. I think this is really important because patient-reported outcome measures are still, coming into fruition, coming to be better used, not just for treatment, but also in development of what's valuable of a medicine. So what are your endpoints? What are you trying to achieve with a new treatment? And this one is working at a disease area which continues to be really problematic across Europe. It's obviously not a rare disease. Too bad. It's very, very pervasive. But chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is proving a challenging one, and one where patients can actually be a very good contributor to how to design impact and effect and how to better design outcomes. So that's the proactive study. And the one I'll spend a little more time is EUPATI, which is European Patient Academies on Therapeutic Innovation. So those of you, I'm seeing lots of nodding, so you're part of EUPATI, which I think is it's a very good way of explaining how this work needs to go forward. I think it's going to be providing the bedrock for this collaboration across Europe going forward. It's a patients academy. It's got, as you can see up there very briefly, it was established in 2012. It runs through 2017. It's been funded under the IMI, and you can see there's FPF funding, but there's also leveraged funding from the Commission. It's a good example of a public-private partnership, and that funding is really there to do things that patients have determined to be most important to establish therapeutic innovation process. So you'll see in their training courses, educational materials, and the online library. And I don't know if anybody saw this, but it was actually published earlier this spring in Nature Medicine. Really nice summary on EUPATI and how it was working. The title was Training on Trials, Patients Taught the Language of Drug Development. And young Geisler, who many of you probably know, he had, I thought, a very nice quote that where they quote him saying, if you want to challenge a process, you need to understand what the process is. When patients don't understand the process, they might delay the process by suggesting things that may not be feasible, and it might frustrate people on the development side. But more importantly, I think his earlier point, which is young Geisler believes that involving patients while designing trials and developing drugs will help so that non-scientific factors that are still crucial to evaluating a drug's efficacy can be taken into consideration. And I think it's, what's in it for companies and what's in it for patients is really very clear in those 2 points. It helps everybody understand mutually what the goal is, what the best goals are. And I think that's why both of these 2 projects, I think, are informing more effective drug development for our members, but at the same time, hopefully, help patients understand how things have been developed up to now and what's the best way to work work forward. So that's already happening, and really excellent work that it does, and I'm glad you guys are already involved with your PATI, and I'm always keen to help wherever I can with that work, because I think it is so fundamental. Here's some of the pictures from some of their workshops. So those of you who've been at these, you might see yourselves. The patient involvement at the top this was the workshop in patient involvement in drug development from theory to reality. And that's again about, engaging people, how practically that could work. And the bottom one is the PATI 2014 workshop, which was about reaching a public audience on medicines development. Because again, the other feature that is very important to ABPI members, to all of the industry, is to, actually, your roles as patient advocates is critical in explaining this wider process of medicines development. I am frequently, there was a very nice piece of research that PATI did, if you ever have a chance to look at it, which did a survey of 6 European countries to ask them, what do you know about medicines development? And it was pretty much nothing. 75%, no idea what you're talking about. And that's a problem because it's very hard to explain how we're going to change things and work together if they don't even understand what this is, the process. So I wish, I didn't obviously get to participate in this PATI 2014 workshop, but they do sometimes do summaries of them, and that's the little blurb on there. If you go on the PATI website, you'll find these easily accessible, and I read them too because I learned a lot from that process. Oops. So what was else there? Oh yes. And there was also, they do webinars. So if you can't travel to these events, and I appreciate that's a challenge, it's a challenge for me, they do have webinars. So one of the ones that I saw on the website the other day was this one on how to enable meaningful patient contribution to ethical review, an ethical review process for clinical research, for example. So worth keeping in mind, and this is what's already going on now, which is wonderful. In clinical research points, your European bodies, Bordis, have already established this charter framework between sponsors and patient organizations. And again, it's about general principles, it's rules of the road that help you understand on what basis patient advocates and patient organizations should be participating in a clinical trial. How does that work well? And that's something that obviously, I think it's been around since 2009. So these things have already existed and I think are already helping to frame a good collaboration. So you might think all is well, it all sounds good to me, why are we still talking about it? And we're still talking about it because unfortunately it is a very favorite topic to challenge patient groups on these issues. It continues to be. So the top one is a Daily Mail article that some of you may have seen recently, which challenged the RNIB. On this basis, and came to the frequent top lines: should health charities stop taking cash from drug firms? And it's obviously not all about that, but that becomes the clear hook. Unfortunately, their spell check was not working. I noticed in the Daily Mail, but okay. Moving on. The New York Times had picked up something earlier. I mean, you can find snippets forever. They will always try and ask the question: if you are involved with a pharmaceutical company, can you be truly independent? Can you truly have your own agenda? How much are you co-opted by these activities? Well, we worry about that because if patient organizations cannot be seen as representative and independent and able to participate at that basis, it doesn't help the pharmaceutical industry one bit. We need to have partners who can play their role so that we can play ours and that we can still collaborate. The worst opportunity will be for patients if everybody stops talking. That'll be the worst of all possible outcomes. We have to find a way through. And the way I think we should be doing to find that common ground is that we do need transparency. That's important. It's important for you as patient organizations. It's important for the pharma industry, for companies involved in these things. We need clear rules of engagement that can be seen from outside, that people can recognize as being used. And then we need to have dialogue and monitoring to help establish that trust. And it's something that we've started with, again, I'm going to something that already exists, really. So at ABPI, we have something called the Code of Practice. It's a voluntary code for the pharmaceutical industry. It's also It's not just our membership who sign up to it. Other companies who are not direct ABPI members can choose to participate in the code practice and will be signatories to it. It's moderated and administered by an arm's length body called the PMCPA, or the Prescription Medicines Code of Practice Authority. They will review and understand how the code is being applied. You can raise complaints to them if you see something that doesn't look quite right. And if it will be evaluated by the PMCPA, and they will publish outcomes on that. So they publish it not only on their website, they publish it in some of the big medical journals so that there's line of sight as to what happens. It was established, as you can see, way back in 1993, and there are specific guidance given in what's called Clause 27. And there's a little link there at the bottom, which I think my slides will be made available afterwards for us, so you'll have that. But the link there will take you directly to the Clause 27. And as you see, I've just got a little snippet up at the top that it obviously gives an understanding that we shouldn't, and it's valuable to work with patient organizations. There's some details on how you should manage that practice, and that's given in all these little sub-clauses. So the detail is there and explicitly about how you should be working with them, how do you manage the transparency, how do you manage a funding relationship, all those details are there. And as companies that would be signatories to the code, you will be evaluated on that. So if you don't abide by those codes, you can be in breach, and PMCPA will issue sanctions. So it's got teeth. It's also got, I think, some good guidance in there about how to set things up. Oops, sorry, I went too fast. So, and again, this is going to be difficult to see the back, so I'm not going to ask you to, but this is just a little example. So one of the point is about being transparent about the financial relationships. So in that, the code asks that, and this is the yellowy bit, that every signatory company has to provide a list of who it's providing financial support to, and the reason why. So what was it all about? And this should have details of the monetary value, but also if there's non-financial support. So it should explain pretty plainly, this is what we did, this is who had the money, this is how, this is what it was for. And just I've given you a little snippet there that every company will have that. If you go onto their website, they should have a little link that'll take you to where it's going to go. So in this case, you can click in to find out this company's involvement with patient organizations in these given years. Others may have a click here, and you'll get to a different data set. Others may just publish it by the recipient. So they'll have different ways of providing it, but all the information should be there. So I hope that's not the first time you've seen something like that. Okay, well if it is, it's there. please have a look. But that's important, and that's part of the code. And it's about being very transparent about that process. Also, it's about establishing what the rules of engagement are. So on what basis should we be working together? So how far should that extend? What's an appropriate way? How should we manage the relationship so everybody feels equally protected and confident that their views are being heard? And I meant to bring a copy of this with me, and I forgot. That was really silly. It was something that was discussed. I mean, obviously, we're having this conversation here in the UK. We could be having this in Peru. This is not a UK-only issue. This is a global issue, and if anything, having worked a lot in Latin America in the past, it's extremely suspect in Latin America. I really feel for the patient organizations down there. They have a very hard time defending their independence because they will always be challenged as being mouthpieces for pharma. Other places in the world, it's also challenging, but here in Europe and more widely, we have some agreed frameworks which help, again, act like an umbrella support to guiding how people can establish the expectations for what they're doing, what's valuable to each party, so what does each party need to get out of the partnership, what's in and out of scope. It's equally important to say what is out of scope as much as what is in scope, and hopefully then has a framework by which other people outside the collaboration can look in and say, actually, that seems pretty well designed, and I feel fairly confident that these guys can have their own point of view and not feel somehow, tied to any particular issue. And so one of the successes I'm just naming here is this one that was again done at an international level by IAPO that I mentioned earlier, together with our sister association at the international level, which is IPMA. And ABPI was also part of the drafting group because of the code experience. It also includes the World Medical Association, so the representative group for clinicians, FIP, which is the pharmacists, and also we had the generics trade industry in there as well. And I think this was the first time that you had that alignment between healthcare professionals and the nurses. I should remember they were in there as well. And that is something that is now, it's like a 4-pager, but it does have some very nice principles, and that's something you can also find really nicely on the web. It's easy. It's a good background to just at least keep things on a good rule of engagement. The Ortis Code of Practice, again, was established a while back. That one was definitely 2009. And again, you may have seen this one, but it has a lot of similar principles about getting those rules of engagement clear. And this was adopted right away by 16 EU-wide groups who endorsed it. And I think really the comment that was made by the Ortis head at the time, Francois Bouillet, was really the key piece, which was at the same time, the reason why we do this is obviously rare disease patients groups have an interest in interacting with the healthcare industry, especially pharmaceutical and biotech companies. At the same time, they need to secure their credibility by remaining independent and transparent when engaging with them. So it all comes back to the same points. Can we establish a way of working that at least gives everybody a clear line of sight on how it's going to work? And how are we trying to go forward from this? Because those sound very nice. The structures are there, the rules are there, the code is there. What else can we be doing? Well, we decided at ABPI that a key part was really, again, taking this a bit more beyond just rules into expectations and hopefully objectives for better partnerships, more meaningful partnerships going forward. And we've been working with National Voices as a representative group to develop a UK-based guide on collaboration. And at this stage, as I understand the project, the objectives are to produce a clear and comprehensive guide on the high standards of working, so again, the rules of engagement. But here's what I like best. It's about generating discussions and that will inform the content of the guide. Because to some extent, we've been developing rules and we've been developing some frameworks of operation. But do we actually have a good understanding of what each other really would benefit and derive from that collaboration? Is that something that's generally well understood? What should we be encouraging people to think about when they're beginning a process like that? So the discussions that have happened so far, I think there have been 2 or 3 workshops, have really been about elaborating what do the different parties want to see in a guide? What would be useful? What's the right sort of information to be including about effective working? And I think maybe even the UPATI partnership should probably inform this process and tell us what's been working well, what's not working well. Where do we have common misconceptions? What should we be watching out for? What are opportunities that sometimes get missed that we should be thinking about? And if we can get that guide developed and done, then the hope is that you'll have that transparency and accountability, but critically, you get the patient benefit. This isn't just about, satisfying a need to look that things are right and proper. It should also be delivering real value to the process. So how will we know if these partnerships are really moving the needle for everyone, for patients in particular? So what are we doing next? We have a steering group which is chaired by Harry Caden, who is the Chief Executive of the Professional Standards Authority, so we're trying to get some rigor into the guidance terms. We've had a survey and a series of interviews, again, to help try and pursue that a bit further. And the aim is that we should be publishing this in July. And I was not told when in July, just July. So I'm hoping sooner in July rather than later, but definitely July. And you'll be able to find this. Obviously, I'm happy to sort of, as soon as it comes out, pass the link through to Flora, and you guys can have a direct link. But if you're ever on the ABPI site, you'll find a link directly off of this site here, which is reflecting the work we do with our patient organization forum. And I just wanted to take a little time to just explain what that is. So within ABPI, we have a thing called the Patient Organization Forum to bring together representatives to the pharmaceutical industry with obviously with patient groups and charity groups in an open forum. And again, the aim is to identify what's the areas for mutual interest, how do we better promote understanding and develop a joint policy, working on policy and practice. And I think that's something that has been really well, really valued within ABPI. It has a steering group and has meetings that are co-chaired with member companies, and obviously all of those, we have to practice what we preach. So everything is put together on our patient organization forum site, so you can see who's been participating in the meeting and what was said. As Flora mentioned, I've only joined ABPI I think about 3 months ago now. So one of the things that I think has been a little bit lacking in the last series of the patient organization forums is that we haven't had a lot of representation there from the colleagues that I work with primarily in member companies who are in the R&D side of things. So what I've asked for is in the autumn that we have a patient organization forum specifically on R&D issues, and it could be that something from today might be a really good subject to put to that group, and how people can participate in that. I will be happy to progress. So that's our patient organization forum. The companies that participate in that, again, in the interest of transparency, I'm trying to walk the walk here, folks. These are the companies that are participating regularly in that patient forum. So it's, you'll see many of my old employers, there they are, and maybe other companies that you're working with, and I hope so. It's not an exclusive thing. Other companies can join it as and when. These are the companies who've been part of it up to now. And these are the groups who have been participating up to now. And again, it's not an exclusive process. The aim is to encourage collaboration and conversations with all the relevant patient groups, but these are the groups we've had around the table, including, as you can see, some of the charity groups. So NCRI is the cancer research group. It's the institute that's based at CRUK that coordinates all the cancer research in the UK. And that's also available online. So again, my slides will be circulated afterwards, but this is an updating list. So if you're interested, or please let me know if I'm here all afternoon. But it's something that we'd like to see continue to grow. These are the topics that have been addressed this year. And as you can see, as I say, some of the unlocking data for medical research and drug development in healthcare was led by a colleague of mine, Shahid Hani, who's been leading the work that we do in my team around health data, which is great. Probably more to do there. There is an aim to have in September, we have work around, sorry, that was from last September, the health policy. And we've had, going back, options around specialized commission and that sort of thing. As you could say, again, I'd like to see a little bit more on the R&D side, so that's the plan for the meetings going forward, to see what R&D topics. I'd be interested today from your comments, what you would find most interesting from the patient perspective about driving conversations around how we're doing R&D. For example, one of the issues that's not on there that I was considering, and it's a question for you all, is on adaptive pathways approaches and how we're revising how we approach R&D and clinical development under adaptive pathways, or what that might involve, and how patients can be better recognized in that process. So that was just one idea that seems obvious to me might be a good area for discussion, but I'd welcome some thoughts from you all on that one. And then I think I'm on, oops, my last slide. Oops, I'm jumping. So I want to come back again to the point around common ground, and that if we're going to find some common ground to advance patient-centered innovation, which is what everybody is saying, then I think it's not it's something that we can easily do through collaboration. we should be able to do it through collaboration if we focus on what brings value to the patient. And that should be our common ground. And I think that should be a good starter for 10 in any good partnership between the pharma industry and the patient groups. And if we're doing that through collaboration, then we're going to have to be aware that, it's good to have the interest and collaboration. That's the sort of sine qua non, that's the initial piece, is do you actually want to engage and truly engage on the issues. But once you're doing that, you're going to need to have transparency about it, clear rules of engagement, and actively participate and monitor and provide feedback when things are going well and when they're not, to help ensure that we're really progressing the process. Because too many times I've seen collaborations that look great on paper, but they don't seem to have a whole lot behind it. So we have to be active collaborators in this process. And I think it's easy for me to say as ABPI that we're keen to do this, but I think I also can say pretty confidently that I'm speaking for the member companies that this is something that is seen as a must-do and a valuable part of how to continue to improve and develop better medicines for patients. So that's all I really wanted to cover today, and I wanted to leave more time if there were questions or issues that come up. I appreciate though that there'll be a lot of case studies coming later, which are probably going to better illustrate these points with some real texture. This is all fairly theoretical as I've been just wrapping up to now. But happy to take any questions now if we can still do that. Great.